Okay, these are the video solutions for 3.1 practice number 4. 3.1 was a doozy. Lots of stuff to learn here. So same kind of stuff, just an extension of what we were doing in practice 3. We're trying to solve this quadratic equation, but just like before, we can point to a single x, so therefore we can isolate it by reversing order of operations. So more of that. So we're going to reverse order of operations to isolate the x. So we got to just work our way through this. Well, outside of parentheses, is there any addition or subtraction to do? No, there's not. We can get through that stage. Outside of parentheses, there is no multiplication or division. The very first thing we hit is the exponent, right? So we're going to undo the exponent by square rooting both sides. So we're going to get the square root of 4x minus 3 squared equals the square root of 121, right? And so that undoes the square rooting that side, and I end up with 4x minus 3 equals plus or minus. Whenever I square root both sides of an equation, I get the plus or minus, and the square root of 121 is 11. So then if I have 4x minus 3 equals plus or minus 11, to isolate the x, here's the way I like to do this. We're going to add 3 to both sides, but we'll put the 3 in front of the plus or minus. So we get 4x equals 3 plus or minus 11, and then I'll just divide each side through by 4. So what do we get then? We get x equals 3 plus or minus 11 over 4. So if we take the plus sign, 3 plus 11 is 14 over 4. So one solution with the positive sign is 14 over 4, which reduces to 7/2. So there's one solution. If we take the minus sign, 3 minus 11 is negative 8. So the minus sign gives us negative 8 over 4, which is negative 2. So my two solutions are (7/2) and negative 2. Okay, maybe a tiny bit harder. What about this time? Okay, I'm going to reverse order of operations again. So the first thing I'm going to do outside of parentheses is I've got to undo multiplying by negative 3. So I'm going to divide each side by, I'm going to divide each side by negative 3. And that's going to give me the quantity 2x minus 4 squared equals positive 80. Okay, what's next? Well, now the last thing to do before we go inside the parentheses is undo the squared, so I'll square root both sides. So I've got 2x minus 4 equals plus or minus the square root of 80. So what's the biggest perfect square factor of 80? Let's see, 16 times 5 is 80. So we could write this as plus or minus the square root of 16, which is a perfect square, times the square root of 5. The square root of 16 is just 4. So we get 2x minus 4 equals plus or minus 4 radical 5. And then the last couple steps, I'm going to add 4 to both sides, and I'll put the 4 in front of the plus or minus, and then I'll divide each side through by 2. And so I get the answer x equals, let's separate this. So I've got 4 over 2, I'm going to break this into two fractions. I'll write it that way. So we get 4 over 2 plus or minus 4 radical 5 over 2. 4 over 2 reduces to 2. The 4 over the 2 reduces to a 2, so I get 2 plus or minus 2 radical 5. That becomes a 2. Okay, so enter those separated by a comma. Okay. Let's do one of these. All right, so what about this guy? Now, working backwards through order of operations, from the bottom up, we're going to add or subtract first. So first thing we'll do is subtract 5 from both sides. And so that's going to give us the quantity 4x plus 2 squared equals negative 16. I'll square root both sides to undo the squared, which gives me 4x plus 2 equals, I got to include a plus or minus, the square root of negative 16. And remember that when we have a negative number under the radical, we can rewrite that as I outside the radical. So I get plus or minus I times the square root of 16, and the square root of 16 is 4. So really all I'm getting here is plus or minus 4i. So 4x plus 2 equals plus or minus 4i. So I'll go ahead and subtract 2, which is the same thing as adding negative 2 to both sides. I'll put it in front of the plus or minus, and then I'll divide both sides through by 4. I'll go ahead and just divide each term separately by 4 and save a step. That's the same thing as dividing the whole right side by 4, is to divide each term by 4. And so then I end up with x by itself equals negative 2 over 4 is negative 1/2, plus or minus 4 over 4 is 1i. So it's negative 1/2 plus or minus I. And that's in the correct form because notice if you look at the directions here, let's see. It wants us to write our solutions, if they're complex numbers, it wants us to write them in the standard form a plus bi, where a is the real part and b is the imaginary part, so they're separated. Well, that's what we did, right? Real part is negative 1/2 and the imaginary part is 1, the coefficient of I. Okay? Oh, what'd I do? Did something wrong here. Let's see. What did our work say? So we got. Okay, my mistake. Obviously, I didn't type what I wrote, what I said. That was supposed to be a minus sign, right? And I typed it as plus both times, but it's supposed to be negative 1/2 plus or minus I, so that should have been a minus. And you can see that's what the answers were down here. So my careless error, but hopefully you see how to do it. Okay, let's do maybe one of these challenge questions and that'll be good. So same kind of situation. What are the steps going to be here? I got a few more steps to cover. Got a reverse order of operations. There's so many of them to do. Let's go ahead and write our order of operations tree. bottoms up. So first thing we'll do is any addition or subtraction, we'll add 10 to both sides, which is going to give us 4 times the quantity 2x plus 4 squared equals negative 400. Next we'll divide both sides by 4. Remember, you can't distribute that 4 because this quantity is being squared, right? That doesn't work. So instead, we're just going to divide, we're going to undo multiplying the quantity by 4 by dividing by 4. And so that leaves us with the quantity 2x plus 4 squared equals negative 100. We'll square root both sides to undo the squared. So that gives us 2x plus 4 equals plus or minus the square root of negative 100. Well, that's going to give us an I. The negative inside means an I outside, and the square root of 100 is 10. So the square root of negative 100 is really just the square root of 10i. The 10 comes from the square root of 100, and the I comes from the negative side. And then last couple steps, now that we've undone the exponent, is we work inside the parentheses. So last 2 steps to isolate x would be to subtract 4 from both sides and divide by 2. So if we subtract 4, I'll put the negative 4 in front of the plus or minus. So then I get 2x equals negative 4 plus or minus, 10i, and then I'll divide each side through by 2, so I'll just divide every term on the right by 2. And so I get my answer, x equals negative 2 plus or minus 10 over 2 is 5i. So negative 2 plus 5i, negative 2 minus 5i. And we got it. All right, I'm done.